Hello, gathered friends, I'm Harora Nuva, and welcome to BIONICLE Deep Dive, where we analyze the tropes, characters, and lore of LEGO BIONICLE. In this video, I wanted to explore the thematic significance of why the Konoe Ignika, the Mask of Life, required everyone who used its power to sacrifice themselves. Let's dive right into it. The Mask of Life is perhaps the most powerful, and certainly the most influential, of all the masks of power in BIONICLE. And there's a legitimate argument to be made that it could be the most powerful object or being in the entire story. At its full power, the mask can completely resurrect the Great Spirit from death, drain the life from every living being inside the Matoran universe, and when combined with the energy of the prototype robot, completely reform the ecosystems of the planet Spherus Magna. At lower levels of its power, the mask can evolve or devolve living things, cause massive transformations, bestow new powers, and create living beings from inanimate objects. There appears to be no limit to its capabilities, and the mask functioned well as a plot device to do whatever the story needed to happen. So long as it could tangentially be related to the concept of life or living things, the mask could do it. Now, it's no exaggeration to say that anyone who wielded the mask had access to godlike power. It is interesting, then, that in order to wield said power, one had to be willing to sacrifice themselves, as the Ignika turned the user into the very energy it unleashes. The theme of power coming with a price is a prevalent and fascinating one throughout fiction, and I think that the way BIONICLE handles it with the Ignika is very interesting, as this ultimate power comes with an ultimate price. Every character that uses the Mask of Life at its full power ends up sacrificing themselves in some way. With Motoro, he literally died when he used it to resurrect Matanui. The other unnamed Toa who healed Matanui during the Great Disruption also met the same fate. Toa Ignika, who was actually the mask itself after it created a body to walk around in, had to give up his body and his time spent being alive as a Toa in order to power the Kodrex and reawaken Matanui. And then there's Matanui himself, whose spirit had been bonded to the mask, combining the power of the prototype robot to heal Spherus Magna, destroyed the prototype robot body, and Matanui's consciousness retreated back into the mask. While the last two aren't fully considered proper deaths, it is notable that they had to give up their ability to live among their friends and be in the world in order to use the mask's full power. Now some users, specifically Matanui and Toa Ignika, were able to use some lower power abilities of the mask with no issue, such as when Matanui granted the Glatorian elemental powers, or Ignika used his own powers. These abilities all seem to be on the same level of power as the mask's various curses, i.e. the ability the mask is willing to grant the unworthy. But to use the mask at its absolute full world-shaping power has always resulted in the destruction of the wearer's body and the loss of their current mode of life. The mask's curse also plays into it, as it inflicts a curse upon all those who touch it who are not worthy. Originally, this seemed to be a form of deterrent to drive them away from the mask, or punish them to prevent them from using it, but there's also another side to it as well. When the mask gave its very first curse, it actually seemed to believe it was being generous to the great being that touched it. It knew that great being wasn't worthy, so they couldn't be given the full power of the mask, but the mask decided to bestow upon them a fraction of its power, almost as if it were bestowing a gift. And even those small portions of its power are incredible, and many of them help the holder become way more powerful than they were before. We see when Toa Ignika and Matanui use the powers of the mask at lower levels, it's always in ways that are similar in scope and form to the curses. So it may be that the curses are really just the lower amount of power that the mask would allow the unworthy to use. Still pretty powerful, but not universe-shaping, so not requiring the sacrifice to ensure worthiness. But now, why does the mask require these tests of worthiness? I'd say it's because the Konoe Ignika, even compared to the other legendary masks, stands out in being so universe-shaping. While the Mask of Time had similar, and in some ways greater potential to end the world, the Ignika was far more versatile. The Vahi also came into being under far different circumstances. The Vahi was only made relatively recently in BIONICLE history, by Vakama, about 1,000 years ago during the Great Cataclysm. Until then, the materials for its creation existed as separate hidden objects, the Great Discs, which makes sense. Whatever purpose the Vahi had, it didn't seem to be something that would be needed to regularly be used. The Ignika was created right at the beginning of the Matoran universe. and as its role was to heal and revive the Great Spirit in case his health was jeopardized, something that did happen more than once and couldn't be predicted. The Mask of Creation, while also technically being at the same power level, was by far the least dangerous in terms of world-ending potential. Artaka could be trusted to keep it safe and use it responsibly. But unlike the other two, the Mask of Life was both very necessary and very dangerous, putting it in a position where it always had to be available, but had to be hidden behind the most secure challenges possible. Now, the thematic significance of the numerous tests and challenges faced by those who descended the staircase to the mask deserves its own video. But there's one in particular that ties into this theme the most, and that is the one that demands one member of the party to sacrifice themselves, or else they must give up their quest entirely. At the end of the test, the one who sacrifices themselves is resurrected because, quote, "It is not the cold, hard fact of death, but the willingness to die for one's cause." This challenge was specifically on the heroic path down the stairs, and absent from the villainous one. For a hero to be worthy of the Mask of Life, they must be willing to make the sacrifice, for that is what they will inevitably be called to do. This connects specifically with Motoro, because it was shown that the reason Motoro was the destined wearer of the Konoe Ignika was because the mask tested him, and he passed. On his journey to Voyonui, while traveling with the other future Toa Ignika, Motoro and his group passed through a tunnel that absorbed all light and sound, rendering travelers completely isolated and afraid. While wandering in the dark, Motoro ran into what felt like another being huddled in the cave. Without hesitation, Motoro grabbed their hand and did his best to reassure them that they weren't alone, and tried to guide them out of the tunnel. Only when he reached the end and saw that all his friends were out, did he realize that the being he felt was an apparition, one that disappeared as he left the cave. The apparition was in fact the power of the mask reaching out to him and testing his character. Even when isolated and afraid, Motoro's first instinct was to help someone, even if he wasn't sure who they were. If anyone can be trusted with the godlike powers granted by the Mask of Life, it's that kind of person. Essentially, the only person who could be trusted with that kind of power is one who would use it completely selflessly. That's why the mask had to come with the price of death. It's the ultimate deterrent. Anyone who would use the mask for selfish or power-hungry reasons would be thwarted, because what good is selfish gain if you aren't alive to use it? Now, obviously that didn't completely stop those looking to use the mask for conquest, as the Paraka certainly made a stab at it. Zaktan even knew about the legends that said the user of the mask would die under normal circumstances, though he was gambling that the current circumstances were so abnormal he would find a way to get around this. Now, with both Motonui and Toa Ignika, the circumstances were slightly different. But still, in both cases, when they used the mask's full power with the intention of causing universe-shaping effects, the usage destroyed their current body, and they were forced to retreat back into the mask. While different reasons were given for these cases, the thematic through-line of the mask requiring sacrifice is still incredibly strong. And I really think Greg Farshchi and the other writers did an amazing job of keeping this consistent, as it added so much weight to the mask and its uses. That's my analysis on the consistent theme of the price of the power of life is death, and how that shaped the narrative surrounding the Konoe Ignika. What do you guys think? Do you like the consistency of this trope? And how do you feel about the broader trope on power coming with a price? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys soon. Take care, my gathered friends.